He was born May the 12th, 1925, the second of 5 sons of Dr. Clifford and Mary Monk Whatley. The conversation you're about to hear was recorded in his Atlanta home on May the 22nd, 2021, with me and his nephew, Jim Whatley, who also happens to be my brother-in-law. At one point in the conversation, his daughter, Fran Hollyfield, comes in, and I keep the recorder going. Bill was the ripe young age of 96 that day, but you would never know it when you hear him. Dr. Clifford and Mary produced an amazing group of sons. Mary was named Mother of the Year for the state of Georgia in 1969, well after all her sons had found success in life. 3 of the sons, a doctor, a businessman, and a pharmacist, chose to stay in Reynolds, Georgia, and spent their entire lives in the town they were born. 2 moved away and found success in South Carolina and Atlanta. None of them ever forgot their roots or their very rich heritage. You will hear Bill Whatley talk about his family and his roots and about his love for the town that gave him some of the fondest memories of life and a springboard to a wonderful career. Bill had a very successful career as an architect in Atlanta. For many years, he has kept a second home in Reynolds, and he will tell you exactly why that was so important to him. The first and most important reason I share this is for his family. There are many Whatleys these days. This is a conversation that should be preserved and shared for all Whatleys to hear, not only now, but to treasure in years to come. This conversation also gives strong credibility to small-town America, which has been a very important part of our society. Contrary to popular belief, some of the greatest Americans who ever lived came from small rural towns, which have almost become extinct. You will hear a man who is very proud of the town he came from, and he'll brag on it relentlessly. I am sure others are just as proud of their town, but this one happens to be ours. There's just something very special, powerful, and poignant about hearing a 96-year-old man who has had a wonderful life talk about it. This is Bill Whatley on Reynolds, Georgia.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
Are you 96?
Yeah. I am today, yeah.
Today.
As of the 12th of this month.
As of the 12th, okay.
Uh-huh.
How about that? Well, you just ran on by Father. He was 92 and a half.
I'm the last of Mary's 5 boys, you know.
You is, ain't you? You the oldest right now, for sure.
Yeah.
But you're going to be the one that's going to challenge Daniel Whatley.
I believe you are.
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, I tell you the truth, I don't know that I want to do that.
Yeah, 112 is a little far.
Yeah.
and to ride a horse the same day.
That's right. Yeah. Well, he could mount one from behind.
That's what I saw.
At 80.
I know. I read it. Trust me, I read it all.
You know, when you get as old as I am, you can write your own history.
You can,
about
Jason.
what happened. Nobody
tell
can
you
argue
what.
with you. I think about your daddy, about Ed. And I remember when Papa died, I overheard him tell somebody, I don't know, it was one of the pallbearers or something, but he said, this is going to be a big funeral. And it was.
Yeah.
Now, how did he estimate it?
Yeah, that you could tell.
Whose funeral?
Well, what he just saying in general, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, he knew. You know, because you can tell by who they are, how many people they knew, and how much the phone's ringing.
And he'd done enough of them. He knew that what it took to make them.
But one of the things I've read in these old papers, which I look at all the time, just about every time somebody prominent dies, they write the funeral up. It was the biggest funeral they ever had. I bet it said 15 times I've read already. Every one of them was the biggest one they ever had.
Well, people down there like funerals, I guess.
I guess not.
I'll tell you, why don't we go in the house
All right.
where it's comfortable and
Let's do that.
see, I flew in those big B-24s and B-17s. They had open waist windows. They were not enclosed. And if you think about it, they've got 4 great big engines right up there with what we call a short stack.
Right.
Exhaust pipe called stacks. And they were just belching noise.
Did you fly in B-17s and B-24s?
Yeah, I'll tell you why I flew. I was not a pilot.
Right.
I was what they call an aerial gunner.
Okay.
But I did not go into combat.
Right.
Some of the people have asked me, they know I was in service. They said, well, what did you do? I said, well, I taught people how to kill people. And
So you went literally right out of high school, didn't you?
yeah, well, not right out of high school. Right out of high school, I went to Mercer.
Okay.
And I did a quarter. Like say, we're doing quarters then, not semester.
Right. So
I did a quarter and started another one, and I went into service. So I was 18.
Okay. Were you 18 when you went in?
Yeah.
Did you go 11 years or 12 years of school?
11.
You went 11.
Yeah.
Huh.
So you graduated in 40?
2.
42.
Yeah,
42.
40. That's what we figured out.
Yeah, your dad was in 40. You got 40. So you went 11 graduates. Somebody asked me today when that changed. I thought it was 40, but it was later then. Were you the last group that went 11?
It was. Tell you the truth, I don't know.
Yeah. I was telling Jim last night about the Kuliks and how that's the most interesting story. I've talked to every Kulik you can think of.
I'm glad they came up. I'm glad you brought the Kuliks up because they were exceptional people.
They had to be. And what struck me about that story is that here you got these Hebrew talking people coming from Jews to come to Reynolds, Georgia, and they was welcomed with open arms. And they became part of the community as much as anybody did.
Well, the reason it happened was David
Kulik.
Mr. Kulik, he immersed himself into Reynolds life.
Right.
He didn't just have a store and sit there and wait for people to come buy stuff.
Right.
He got into everything.
Yeah, I saw he was on the board of the bank.
He was.
Started the golf course.
That's right.
Yeah.
He was, a lot of credit is given Marshall, C.B. Marshall, on the golf course. Kulik was right there with you.
Yeah, that's what I read. I've read that.
Uncle Bill, do you know how they wound up in Reynolds, coming from Poland?
No, I don't.
Don't know.
I have had the same thought, Jim. And you excuse me now if I call you Jimmy because
go right ahead. I'm used
that's
to
the only name I knew until you left town. See,
right.
I have the same thing down in Reynolds. If I get a phone call and I answer and they say, Billy, I know it's somebody from Reynolds.
I know.
That's funny.
And
I know the same thing about Jimmy.
I told somebody the other day, I said, when I went into service, I decided that I was not going to be Billy anymore. I was a man now. I was going to be Bill.
Right.
And so the only person down there that I have given free rein to call me Billy has been Amelia Halley because she ain't going to give it up.
I don't know if you remember this, and you can answer this question. Dad used to tell me this. It's a funny story. When Edgar died, when your Uncle Edgar died, that Brother Culpepper was the preacher in Reynolds.
Okay.
And he started preaching Thurman's funeral. Do you remember that?
I tell you what I remember about that funeral, and I was sitting there, and he started talking about what a great businessman Uncle Edgar was. Uncle Edgar.
He was
a farmer, right?
Yeah.
That's what Daddy said.
I was sitting there, and I said, That man didn't do his research.
Daddy was convinced he had them mixed up. He was thinking Thurman was sitting out in the audience. That's a funny story.
I hadn't thought about that.
So let me tell you what was funny. I said, Daddy always told me Brother Culpepper did that. I said, I tell him what he should do. So I go find his write-up about Edgar's funeral in 62. And I knew Brother Culpepper was there in 62 because I kept up with all that. And there it was, and Brother Culpepper and John Mangum preached his funeral. So I said, it sounds like it was, he was right.
Yeah.
Jay and Brian was one of the first merchants in Reynolds. That he's very prominent.
We
merchant.
knew him as Jake Brown.
Yeah,
He
right.
was called Jake Brown.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I say we, I'm talking about my era. Since you brought that up, I have noticed on Facebook there seems to be a little bit of a discussion now about the big house, what y'all call the big
Right.
house.
Who built that house?
In my opinion, Jake Brown did.
Okay.
The doctor?
No, the
No.
doctor's daddy, but
No,
but
Jake Brown.
The reason he says that Teeny put, I have no idea. I assumed that all my life, but Teeny does not think that her family built that house. It's been added on to. They added on to it, put the second story, but there was another house there, is what Teeny said. But I have no knowledge of that. I mean, that's what she thought.
I have no proof of that.
Right.
But I always heard that.
Yeah.
As I was growing up.
Here, let me ask you a question. This is always confused. You know the story when the head got blown off on the train that exploded over there.
Yeah.
So E.E. Hodges, who was one of the first people in the town,
Yeah.
well, everything I can look at, and his wife went out and stopped the train with a kerosene.
With a kerosene lantern.
So they wouldn't run over. She walked out and stopped it. So I always assumed that they were living at that where the Hodges Hotel ended up across from the Women's Club. But when I read something the other day, they were living over there somewhere on the lot where the Flint utility building is. Where do you think their house? Where was the Hodges
No,
house?
I never heard that.
You
I
haven't?
didn't know that. They've always lived over on that side on the Butler side of Reynolds.
Okay.
In my knowledge.
Yeah. Well, I read something that made me think, I wasn't sure, but Joni Hodges put something that I never knew, that Dr. Mangum lived in the Hodges. He was the first person in the Hodges house. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah. So the Hodges, where Walton Jr. lived and all them, Gene lives now, that was originally Dr. Mangum's house.
Really?
Yeah.
You mean sort of across from the post office?
Well,
Yeah.
Behind the
now,
club?
Yeah.
maybe you can clear this up. In my mind, I'm of the understanding that Dr. Mangum was an adopted child.
No, John Mangum was adopted. John Mangum.
Not Dr. Mangum.
No, Dr. Mangum and his wife adopted John. So John had a brother and two sisters. They all were living in the Baptist Children's Home in Macon. Both of their parents got killed. The brother went somewhere. The two girls died at a very young age. Dr. Mangum adopted John Mangum. So John Mangum was adopted.
Okay.
And that's what that was, yeah.
Well, I was one generation old.
Yeah, and so I've read all about that lately. And so when Dr. Mangum died, that was a big deal. I mean, you could see that in the paper. There were doctors everywhere from all
Was
around.
that the largest funeral ever?
Yeah, all of them were, yeah.
Well,
you read everywhere it was the largest funeral ever.
All right,
But, yeah.
do you know where Dr. Mangum's office was?
No, I guess it was was that upstairs where Dr. Ficklin was?
No,
Where was it?
in the back of Reynolds Pharmacy.
Okay,
In the back of the farm.
so that's where Clyde Hill's place was. I mean, you mean the
Yeah.
Reynolds Pharmacy?
Clyde
over-
Hill was around on the other street. Yeah,
Okay, so they were over there where Reynolds Pharmacy is, where Leonard's place was.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, Dr. Mangum and Leonard created the Reynolds Pharmacy.
Okay, I didn't. Or Clay, you mean, created?
I mean, excuse me,
Yeah.
Clay.
Clay.
Uncle Clay, yeah.
So I didn't know that. So the other thing I noticed when, all the shenanigans of Clyde Hill, that's another whole story.
Oh, it is. Hey, you can't write it all without making somebody mad because he was a reprobate.
I know.
Who was that?
Clyde Hill. So let me tell you the story. This is how I got into this. And then in this old Reynolds, the light turned on. So Miss Carson, Camilla Carson, taught me biology in the 9th grade in Fort Valley.
Yeah, she taught me.
And she used to always ask me who died, what's going on, who did you carry in the ambulance, so every day. And something came up, and I said about people in Reynolds, I said, my daddy told me the worst man ever lived here was Clyde Hill. So he got in the car with him one time and said they like to whooped him to death for getting in the car with him. And I found out about that story later. And I said all that, and she said, "That's my brother."
Yeah, I know.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out they're half brothers, but I thought, Lord have mercy, I wish I had said that. So I started researching all that. So Clyde Hill, his daddy was J.G. Hill, I think was his name, and he was a pharmacist.
He was a pharmacist.
And Clyde became a pharmacist.
Okay.
And Clyde was married to Hidgy James' mama's sister, Ruffin.
I didn't know.
And so there was a Henry James, who was Sid James's brother. He was a young guy. He got murdered in the house that's another house where I want to get more information that you got. It sat on the corner where the new Flint building was built in 1960. You remember that house that said that?
Yeah.
So that was a big murder that I had never heard of it in my life. Mm-hmm. So it turns out that Clyde Hill and his wife had 2 little children, were living in that house, and they were renting a room out to these 2 guys.
To the James guy.
Yeah, James and another roommate. And so the next thing you know, Clyde Hills shot somebody in town, and then he was arrested. His story is crazy. He got arrested all over everywhere. He was a bad dude, and he told me about going to see him because he was such a gangster when he was laying at the funeral home in the back of the old store.
Did I tell you that?
You told me something about it.
I was about to tell you about it, but that was when the funeral home was in the back of the store.
Right.
And I was in Reynolds High School. I don't know what level I was then, but I remember distinctly. And some of us were kind of enamored with Clyde Hill, and he died from a severe accident.
Right. Right
as
up
I
by
remember,
Knoxville Courthouse somewhere.
and it cracked his skull open. Well. Several of us boys, we decided that we wanted to see how well the Gardens prepared him for burial. So we left school during recess and ran uptown, and at that time he was on display. There were some windows on the sidewalk there. And he was in, and we went up there and we looked at him. He looked good. He did. I don't know.
So let me tell you what happened.
Your daddy did a good job, or whoever
Daddy
did.
said, probably Granddaddy, but when Daddy was going to Emory, so that was when he got killed. Was somewhere when Daddy was in college or something. Or actually, when he was bad dude, and I think I look back, it's kind of the end of his. He probably just got out of jail, but Daddy was. He'd hitchhike rides to Emory, and he hitched a ride with Clyde Hill, and and his mom and daddy like to have a fit. So what in the world are you getting in the car with? I think that's how it came up with Camilla Carson. Yeah. It was something she was talking about. I said, my daddy told me to be careful who I got in. He got in the car, the worst man ever lived in Reynolds. That's how that happened. So tell me what you remember about the house. Who in the heck built that house? That was where the new Flint building was built.
I don't know who built it. Okay. That question has come up, and I have tried to go back into my memory and see if I ever heard anybody. Now, Sid Brown and his family lived there at one time.
I didn't know. You mean
Dr. Brown?
Dr. Brown lived in that house? I didn't know that. See, you learn something new all the time.
At one time. It had the murder in that house. That house has a varied history. I have tried. I have written museums about this. Billy Neisler told me you know, back in my day, they had the WPA.
What is WPA?
WPA. We called it the We Piddle Around. It was one of Roosevelt's programs.
Okay.
And they built dams, they built roads,
Right.
they built. There's a park up here in North Georgia that they built. All right. Billy told me that during the WPA days down there, Eisenhower, this was well before the war. Eisenhower was a younger officer at that time. He and his wife, I can't call her name right now, but anyway, you can call it because you're younger.
Eleanor Roosevelt?
No.
Mamie.
Eisenhower's wife.
Mamie.
Yeah,
Mamie.
Mamie. They lived in that house for a short period of time. Mamie and Louise Neisler, Charlotte Neisler's wife, were good friends, and they walked back and forth to each other, to visit each other, because Mamie was new in town.
She lived in Reynolds?
That's what I'm trying to tell you,
Christ.
but I can't prove it.
I never heard that. How about that?
I have proved it. Well, Billy Neisler swore it. And because he even talked about, I don't know whether you know about, but Billy and his Charlie, I don't know who owned it, owned a great big German police dog. And Billy commented that Mamie was scared of that dog. He was a big dog. He was so big that Bubba Newsom rode him. Bubba Newsom was always about this big.
Yeah.
Now, this is hearsay because I can't prove it.
Was this before she met Dwight Eisenhower?
No, she was married to Eisenhower.
When she was living in Reynolds?
Mamie.
Yeah.
And Eisenhower came there because Eisenhower was in charge of the WPA people that lived in that area. But I think about that time he was a captain.
Yeah.
So you can imagine it was...
What was her maiden name?
I don't know.
She have some kind of connections to...
No, I haven't tried Mamie's side. I questioned Billy at great lengths about that thing.
He wouldn't have made it up.
He swore to it.
Oh, I bet.
He was...
Bill, let me ask you a couple of questions. Was Papa the president of his senior class at Georgia?
No, well, no, I don't.
You
No,
don't think so?
no.
Did he have a nickname?
Yes, he did.
Skip,
he had a
Skipper?
couple of nicknames. He was called Skipper, was
Skipper.
one of them,
Okay.
and another one he was called Lover.
Lover?
Yeah.
Well, look here. So I want you to clear this up, and I think I know the answer. My granddaddy always called him Brother Haley. You ever hear that?
Yeah, yeah.
So
they did.
They travel together all the time.
All right, no. He called your granddaddy Brother Haley.
They called
each other Brother Haley.
Really?
Now, I don't know who Brother Haley was.
I'm going to tell you.
All right.
I found, looking at the old Baptist preachers, there was a Brother Haley that was in the Baptist.
I bet that.
That's no doubt about it.
They had some reason to pick
had
that
a
name
reason.
up. He must have been some kind of a character.
He
or
was something about him made them. I found
use
his
that
name
name.
he was a Baptist preacher back in the early 1900s or whenever the church started. Although he was one of them. He also talked about Bailey Jones, Roy Jones.
Yeah.
That he was whatever religion he was, he wouldn't let them do any medicine on him.
Jehovah's Witnesses done.
Yeah, he must have been that.
Really? Yeah, they will not take a transfusion.
A transfusion.
Yeah.
They will not take.
And so that's what
It's against their religion.
Big Daddy commented on that, and I have seen that somewhere else in something that he died young because his religious beliefs. He was a devout man, but Big Daddy said that
I'd heard that. Yeah.
Big Daddy said he delivered the mail, and he always had a fishing pole. He named the name of the reel he had with him, and he'd stop along the thing and fish. Different whale. I love it. That's some great stories, isn't it?
Well, I tell you this, I wish I knew all the story behind it, but you called him by the name that I've called him, Big Daddy, and Mom and Papa. They loved to fish, both of them did.
Yeah.
And they loved to go fishing together.
Yeah. They went to Florida and everywhere.
I know, they would, I'd almost swear to this, that Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning or something, one of them had decided they wanted to go fishing, and they would call the other one, said, let's go to Panacea.
Yeah.
Or let's go to
And
Crystal
that wasn't
River.
no easy trip back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
I remember.
And they would get in the car, they would drive down there, they would fish on Sunday morning, they'd get back in their car with the fish they caught and come back to Reynolds. That's how bad they loved to
That's
fish.
amazing.
Bill, I remember the fish that Mama caught. It was called
Yeah.
a dolphin.
Yeah.
The fish.
Yeah.
I remember she had it displayed in their house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had it out on the
she
porch,
said
and
that she caught it.
the fish may still be around for all I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't interest me. I wasn't a fisherman.
Yeah,
so.
well, I'm not either. Was Papa in the first vet school graduating class?
Yes, he was.
Okay, that's what I thought. I wanted to clear that up. Somebody was
But
saying that he was just
Judy's all upset about that too with the university, because the university made a statement in some written document that the vet school at Georgia was started in 1956, I think.
Huh.
Papa graduated in 21.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's upset? Judy, your daughter Judy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's trying to get that cleared up.
Yeah.
Judy asked me about it. Because she had seen his diplomas, because they hung, at the house.
Okay.
They weren't in an office, they went to the house, in the hall. Somewhere, I know it's lost now, there was a bulletin that gave the graduating class, when they graduated,
Okay.
that he was a DVM. They couldn't have called him a doctor of veterinary medicine if he was not.
That's right.
I mean, the university
Right.
wouldn't have published
Right.
that, that's what I'm
Right.
saying.
Right.
Right.
And we are of the opinion that his diploma states it clearly that his degree was for a DVM. We all knew that, so none of us ever questioned it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's crazy.
But all of a
56
sudden,
versus 21.
this thing came out in print that the veterinary school of medicine was started in, I think it said, don't quote me on it, I think it was 56 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
That doesn't
we
make
knew
any
for a
sense.
fact that he had graduated in 21.
He was farming and working on big
Yeah.
animals, mainly cows and farm animals, or
Well,
horses or whatever.
Yeah, that I'm sure that's what influenced Papa. He was his love was large animals. It was not
Right. And
pets.
some of the stories of him and this guy named Holt McDaniel.
Oh,
Lord,
now that's a story that would fill a book this thick.
Yeah, he was a character, wasn't he?
Oh,
I remember as a little kid sitting at Blanche's house at the dinner table, and we got through eating, and she started telling stories about Hope McDaniel. I mean, he was a little kid, but he was a character. Roy Jones wrote all kinds of stuff about him.
now let's see. Now you never knew Hope, did you?
No, he
Okay.
died right before I was born. Or he died right after I was born. I think he died in 56, 57 or something. He was a character.
Oh, was he a
Okay.
character? But he was a lovable character.
Yeah, one of the stories that Blanche was telling that night is everybody went to Mile Springs, and that's when it was dirt roads, and they were coming about where Don Whatley and them lived, Edgar lived, but it was a dirt road around the curve, and they were having a race, and Hope was in front, and they had bet something, and when he went around the curve, he had headlights hooked up on the back of his car, and he flipped them lights whoever was behind him took off to the woods. They thought he was getting hit up. He went around the curve and flipped them lights on him. People took off. But he was like some groups going on trips. They would take Hope to entertain them.
That's right.
And he was a character now. He was a funny guy. And
You haven't lived until you heard Hope preach a sermon. Woo! I'm gonna tell you, there was just enough of truth in it. but it would have you in the aisle, just rolling.
going back to the Kulicks, we got off.
Yeah.
So one of the things I was telling Jim that Edith Kulick, you dated her or something.
Edith was in my class, yes.
Yeah. And so what I found, and you may have already known this, but she married a guy and he moved to Montgomery and had this big company that got really big. And when he died, she became the chairman of the board
That's
of
right.
it. And her company, under her leadership, created the resealable bag.
She was a rich woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
is that-
Huh?
I won't say I dated Edith. I took her to dances over at the Woman's Club.
Yeah. Oh, Mr. Coleman wasn't living there then, was he? That was
No.
Mr. Coleman's house. I
No. Yeah.
So I've talked to a bunch of Kulicks, and Norm. I think you read all this, but Nora's daughter was Hank Aaron's personal secretary.
Yeah.
And I've talked to her at length. She's like in Boca Raton, Florida. She worked for the Atlanta Braves,
Yeah.
and when Aaron was chasing Babe Ruth's record, he needed a personal secretary. So she handled all the hate mail that was coming because there were people mad because he was black and going to break Babe Ruth's record.
Well, I'm glad.
So
you
she
cleared
became
that
his
up.
personal secretary. And let me tell you more story to that. Hank Aaron just died, but he was very close. He came to their daughter's wedding and all that. Well, her daughter is on some, and I forgot the name of it, but she's a celebrity on a morning New York City national show, Good Morning America, or
Yeah.
CBS This Morning or something.
Her daughter,
Yeah, Nora's granddaughter.
granddaughter.
So this is another story. So there was another daughter. Was it Molly? Molly was one daughter, right?
Yeah, Molly.
Okay. Well, anyway, through talking to there's a Sam Kulick that is the son of the younger brother of David. David Kulick came to Reynolds. He had a brother about 15 years younger than him that worked there for a while and went to Tobbleton and started a store and eventually put the store in Butler. He bought the Dreisens or whatever, which was also kin to David Kulick. So he told me about the lady in Dayton, Ohio. You ought to call her. She's got information. Well, I was telling Jim this story, so I called her. I can't think of her name right now. And talked to her, and I told her I had funeral homes in Dayton, Ohio, 5 or 6 of them, in the same name, Tobias. She said, "You're not gonna believe this, but I got to go to a funeral tomorrow at Tobias Funeral Home." So I picked up the phone and called Dan Tobias, who's the former owner, who I know well. And he went to the service and over there and greeted and met her. Said, "You talked to my friend Bruce Goddard yesterday." And that lady was blown away.
Blew him mind.
So the world is small, isn't it?
Now let's go back to the Kulick family. Now, you called Dan Kulick.
David.
Okay. Now, I grew up with Sammy Kulick.
Right.
Now, Sammy was David's son.
That's right. And he was Daddy's age too. They went to school together.
You know, they used to have a lot of tournaments on that golf course.
And he won them, didn't he?
If Sammy was in the tournament, everybody else said, "Well, there's no hope.
Right.
Sammy's gonna win."
Right.
Sammy was quite a golfer.
Well, Sam Kulick, who was his nephew, used to play in Reynolds with his daddy, who was, I forget his first name. I read it yesterday. So he remembers coming in the 60s. They had the Kulick Marshall Trophy. So this guy's lives in Atlanta, and he's probably, I imagine, 80 years old. I didn't ask him, but
Is this Samuel?
this is David Kulick's younger brother's son, lot younger brother's son. And he's a financial planner in Atlanta, but I've talked to him at length. And the story that hit me about that is in a time where everybody accuses everybody of being not diversified and not having sensitivity to races, way back then, this little town in South Georgia embraced these Jews. Not only that, but the Prager family was another one. They embraced these people and they became part of the community. I saw a thing where my great-grandfather was at the house over there that the Kuliks, David Kulik, lived at. Somebody was getting married. They listed the people there, and I'm sure the other people. I just saw he was there. I mean, it was they were all friends. That's for sure.
Well, the Edith and Molly both. They came to. They participated in all of the youth programs at both churches.
Oh, did they? I wondered about
yes,
that.
They did.
Even though they were Jewish. How about their parents? Did they come, or they? Since they
no.
Just
they
the kids.
did not. They did not attend the churches. They joined. They were members of a synagogue in Macon.
Right, but the kids
and
grew up there.
They went to Macon occasionally. They were not.
Right.
Not devout.
Right.
Now, I grew up knowing that they were Jews.
Right.
All right. To me, Jew was a name, was a word. I did not know that there was any animosity between Gentiles and Jews until I got into the service and I was 18 years old.
Right.
I didn't know it.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
I mean, they were such members of the community, the ones that I knew, which
Right.
were the Coolies.
Right. The other thing that was interesting that I found out was, and I think I read this to you yesterday, in the early 50s, there was a lady named Florine English, and she came...
Florine English? Yeah.
And so her and her husband lived in Portland, Oregon, and she was in the House of Representatives out there, she was in the state Senate, and she came back to Reynolds and became mayor of Reynolds in 1952.
That's right.
And then she beat Charlie B. Higgs.
Yeah.
And there must have not been any animosity towards them, because when she died, Charlie B. Higgs was a pallbearer at a funeral. I pick up all kind of stuff here.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you, people that haven't lived in a town like Reynolds, or most especially Reynolds, they don't know what living is.
Yeah, and I've said that in my traveling, there's not many people, and I really mean this, that have any idea of the connection we have in that town that goes back generations. People don't relate to that. Most people live in bigger places where they know their neighbor a little bit, but they don't know. And that connection is unreal. And the other thing that I guarantee you, I am absolutely convinced of, Reynolds was different than most any place around, because you can look from the people that came out of that town. It is incredible. You go back to the Seeleys and Hugh Camp Seeley, and he started. He's the father of arrhythmia surgery, and he invented that.
Well, Hugh was a classmate of mine.
Yeah, and he was a great guy.
Yeah, and he became as famous as Will Camp.
I used to see him when I speak at stuff. He'd love to come because he would love to hear us talk about Reynolds.
I mentioned just a while ago that Sammy was. I'd have to put him. He was the golfer from Reynolds. I've never heard of anybody that won the tournaments as much as Sammy did. But did you know that Lewis Ruffin was quite a golfer?
I did. And H.C. Bond was a real good golfer.
and Lewis Ruffin.
I remember him playing, but he was older.
They took over the golf world in Reynolds after Sammy moved away.
Yeah, and then I saw they had a women's tournament, and Blanche won it.
Yeah.
Really?
Blanche won the tournament.
Well,
I got pictures of her playing golf.
Two other women. Aunt Leela was a
Golfer.
Golfer. Yeah.
was quite Helen. Yeah, Aunt Little Helen was quite a golfer, and so was Dr. Brian's wife, Louise.
So let me tell you a story. They had what they called a Scotch foursome.
Yeah.
Jimmy's heard this story many times. And Miss Leela was my partner. So she's driving the car and I'm riding with her, and I was a young guy. and she'd hit it about 120, 50 yards down the middle. I'd hit it 300 yards, but maybe 3 fairways over. And she was on places, because we'd have to take turns. It don't matter where it was. She hit it, and I'd hit the next one, she'd hit the next one. You get on the green, you take turns, so you had to play it wherever it was. So we were coming in number 9. There was people all around us.
Yeah.
And I hit a ball into number 9 green. It was real high. He just buried into that trap.
Oh.
And you could barely see the top. Miss Lee, I said, Miss Lee, I'm sorry. I don't know how you gonna hit that. She said, that ain't no problem. She just went over there, she picked the ball up, put it up.
Who was that?
Miss Leela Hinton. That was great.
Yeah.
I am so sorry I buried that ball. That ain't no problem.
She did love to play golf.
Yeah, Cat and Hazel did too.
Well, look at that.
Fran?
I didn't know you were going to be here, New Jimmy was.
Good to see you, dear. How
Good
you
to see
doing?
you too.
Hey, stranger.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine.
Golly, how long has it
Fran,
been?
good to see you, honey.
Hey, good to see
You-
y'all.
you-
We're all
You
working.
didn't used to be gray-headed.
Well, I hit it.
Fran, are you already got a driver's license and everything?
Everything.
You're driving.
Remember, I'm older than you.
By how many months?
Not many. I was a November baby. You March or April?
I'm September,
So
but
you
were
are-
you born in 54?
No, 53.
So I was born in 54.
Oh, you were a September baby?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were like.
I was the baby in my family. I still am.
Yeah.
But
And you know what? It'll stay that way too.
probably will.
I didn't
Yeah.
realize y'all were that close in age.
I want to know what it was like growing up in Reynolds. What do you remember Reynolds looking like? And
There was no pavement in Reynolds, to my knowledge, until late 30s.
right, so it was all dirt roads.
Yeah, everything was dirt. Matter of fact, just about everything was dirt in the county.
Right, right.
And also, my understanding was the first pavement in Taylor County was from the courthouse in Butler going toward Reynolds. There was 3 miles of pavement.
Okay.
It got out almost to Captain Butler's house.
Right.
Yeah. And the other pavement was from the downtown Reynolds, right in the intersection in Reynolds, going north toward Roberta. There was 2 miles. I know about the Goddard store burning, and it was being replaced by a brick building.
Right.
I've seen pictures. They don't look the same.
Yeah,
exactly.
I agree. There's been 2 brick buildings, I'm almost certain. But Big Daddy talks about a wooden building that burned down. That's what confused me.
Well, the store was wooden, wasn't it?
Well, evidently the original one they built
Yeah.
was. So when he says in the interview that when him and his daddy, when he started with his daddy, they were across the street. And that's totally confusing, but he says that in the interview. So what they built, that theater, and they owned those stores going towards Fort Valley from Swearingen for the place.
Yeah.
And it all caught on fire. But that was a long time ago. That was in
Oh, yeah.
that was before
Yeah.
you were born, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. He built a brand new state-of-the-art theater.
Yeah.
And they had the grand opening, and there was a crowd of people came, and it got caught on fire, and they arrested some guy. Somebody caught it on fire, but, you know, I won't go into who did it or whatever, but there was all kind of rumors, but they arrested the guy, and then he got off. Homer Beeland was his lawyer. But they couldn't prove that this guy did it. But somebody caught it on fire. There's no doubt somebody poured gas on it and burned it up. And they had very little insurance, but they built it right back. And so my question in reading all that, how in the heck did they have the money back then to build that theater, this state-of-the-art theater? And I think that E.A. Goddard's older brother, who by then was living in St. Louis, was a wealthy man. I think he was helping them. When my great-grandfather moved to Camden, Arkansas, he moved to live with his older brother because his parents were dead, and he kind of looked after him. So I think he was helping them. I saw where they went, the two of them went to England. And I mean, this is the early 1900s. G.H. Goddard, that was his name. Big Dad was named after him. Him and his younger brother, E.A. Goddard, while he was living in Reynolds, went to England to some World Bank. So I mean, how in the world did you get to England back then, you know?
Boat.
Yeah,
Slow boat.
I guarantee you. So anyway, I didn't get many sidetracked. So tell me about, well, like the stores. What do you remember? I know it was busy on Saturday and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'll go back as far as I can. The pictures that we have now, the original pictures for the group called Old Reynolds.
Right.
They were already existing. Every one of them were existing as far back as I can remember.
Right.
So I never did see any frame buildings on those streets.
Okay. They were all brick.
All brick. Right. So that's as far back as I can go. And of course, naturally, I think we have talked about then, the streets in Reynolds have been lowered.
Right.
Now, why they were lowered, I don't know. And
there's a picture of them like convicts
I went to Georgia Tech, and I have looked at the land, lay of the land. You know, that was my
right.
That
was your expertise.
What I got 2 degrees at Georgia Tech about. So I saw no reason why the land was lowered.
Never thought about that.
You remember the steps you had to go up to get to any of the stores?
Yeah.
But I've never even thought about that.
But the thing about it, if you look at them, Goddard's store wasn't but about this much higher than the main street.
Right. It had like one step.
Yeah.
And over there
across the road at the Hennon, I call it Hennon Hodges. Hennon, Hollis, Hennon Hollis. The 3-story building that burned, the Chevrolet place was. The finished floor in that building was at least 3 to 3.5 feet above the street level.
I saw that.
So that meant that there was a quick drop off.
Right.
Right there. So that's a study in itself.
When you were growing up, I guess it was the Kulik store that was on the corner. They were there.
Yes.
And do you remember Jake Prager's store?
Oh, yes, I do.
That's where Brady's was. I think you confirmed that.
What we known as Brady's store. Brady's store.
Right between there and that store where the phone company is now was where the National Bank was at some time, right? There was a bank there.
Yeah.
It didn't last long.
I gave Jamie a photograph that in the far distance
you can see that bank.
See just a little bit of
that.
That bank that had a white marble front on it.
It was right between Prager, where Brady's store.
It's right on the alley. There was an alley between the bank and Brady's.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right. There was a bank
Boy
there.
Scout hut used to be back in that.
Yeah, it did. There was a boy. That's been mentioned. I don't remember that Boy Scout. I remember Boy Scout hut under the high school, going down.
Where I went was behind.
Is that right? Yeah. You don't remember going to Scouts at the high school building in that basement? That's where I went.
I never went.
I mean, it was a very bustling, busy town, wasn't it?
You can't imagine how bustling it was on Saturday. I made mention, I think, in one of my posts. It was shoulder to shoulder on the sidewalks on Saturday. It was that everybody came to town on Saturday. During the week, it was a farming community. During the week, they were all out there trying to make a living. They came to town to do the shopping,
right,
and the drinking, and whatever, because there was a lot of drinking going on Saturday.
Yeah. And so the Reynolds Mercantile Company. Do you remember that? It was called the Reynolds Mercantile. That may have been in the
No,
early
I remember. I know where the building. That's where the open store was.
Oh, is that where that was? See, I didn't realize that. I'm glad to know that. Yeah.
Matter of fact, I've got something that I'm collecting now.
Right.
Uncle Bill,
Yes.
what about the hospital that Dad came back into the practice with the older Dr. Sams? Who built that building, the original?
Dr. Sams.
Dr. Sams himself, okay.
I do not know if he had any business connections with anybody when it was built, but he was.
So this
Dr. Bryan upset everybody in Reynolds because Dr. Bryan decided he would give up his practice right into World War II. And everybody in town, said, doggone man, said the only doctor we had in town, and he quit.
So his office was over where like Wilson Cleaners was, right?
Yeah, that was Dr. Bryan.
That was Dr. Bryan's office. Okay.
And to my knowledge, he could have been the one. He could have been the one that built that building. I don't know. Jake could have built it because Jake was the daddy of the Bryans back in my era.
Will Camp Seeley started hanging out with Dr. Bryan, and that's how he started getting interested in medicine by hanging out with Dr. Bryan.
Oh, really?
Is that right?
That's
Well,
the difference. That makes sense.
That does make sense.
Yeah, and that's why he went on to Duke and did all the stuff he did.
Well,
yeah.
so the building, Dr. Sams built the building that became, I guess, the first hospital in Rome.
Yeah.
In Reynolds.
Well,
in
it was
Reynolds,
not built as a hospital. It was built as a doctor's office.
It was built as a doctor's office. Okay.
I did some work. I did some design work on it for Edwards and Dr. Sams. That wing, that west wing. Yeah.
I remember you did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did it for.
Gee, whatever happened to all them incubators or whatever everybody that they had, the pictures? You got some great pictures of that.
Yeah.
You got that book at your house?
Yeah.
That Amelia made for your dad at some anniversary? Yeah. Everybody that ever was born in Reynolds, there's the incubator they were in right there. People would like to see that.
Let me tell you something. You're talking about my understanding of Reynolds back in those days. As you know, I came up in the y'all call it the Great Depression. I call it the Deep Depression. That era. I remember coming to town, since we lived a mile out of town, coming to town and either walking or riding or whatever we were doing, and seeing a building, and they had the windows on the front of the building were closed with wrapping paper or something,
right.
or newspaper or something. And I began to wonder what in the world's going on. They were bankrupt, every one of them, bankrupt. And when they bankrupt, they blanked out the windows for some reason. I guess they didn't want people looking in there and saying, if I broke in here, I could get that. I don't know why they did.
Big Daddy went bankrupt. I read about it. I think Freeman Hart in Macon helped him, lend him money, and he was able to pay him back. But he was broke. I mean, you can read. I read the old papers. I mean, it was a mess. I'm telling you.
Well, I knew that was happening, but I remember coming from the house and going to go down to the school. And I came down and turned right, there at the bank, to go that way, past Uncle Clay's store. Paper on the windows.
For
and
his,
that was
his
my
store?
Uncle Clay.
How about that?
Who do you remember as your teachers when you were going through school?
Oh, Lord. Miss Ogden, of course, she was my first teacher. I'll have to admit it to you, and you've got it recorded, so I can't deny it. I wasn't a good student. I repeated the 6th grade.
Is that right?
Yes.
How about that?
And then, bless Pete, I went off to war, and I came back, and I went to Georgia Tech and got 2 degrees. I'm not proud of it. I'm not bragging. I had always, since Edwards was in med school, in my mind, when he got into med school, I said, I believe, I've always been handy with my hands, very coordinated. Back in my younger years, that I wanted to be, believe it or not, a brain surgeon.
Really?
That was my dream.
How-
Well, time went on, and I saw how hard Edwards had to work at Emory. And in my mind, and the fact that I wasn't a good student, I said, ain't no way I can make that. But I'll tell you right now, when I got my two degrees at Georgia Tech, Emory would have been a snap.
Yeah, I bet. That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
So who was your 6th grade teacher that held you back?
They didn't hold me back. That was a family decision. Mama said, you've had problems. She said, what do you think about you just doing the 6th grade over and see if you could catch up? It was a family decision.
Right.
Mr. Joyner didn't put me back.
What was your thoughts of Mr. Joyner?
Oh, man. I was scared to death of him. I'll tell you right now, I hated those Friday
Assemblies?
Yeah, we had a name for them then. It wasn't chapel. It was, but every Friday we went up to the auditorium and tried to see how small we could get.
So he would call on you.
Got up on the steps and, I don't think he knew who he was going to call on. He just looked out there, Billy, come up here. Oh, your daddy wasn't an exceptional student until he got to about the 6th grade, 5th or 6th grade.
Okay.
Matt Mims is the one that stimulated him.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
She told us, when I say us, my mom and daddy or somebody, she said, if Edwards would apply himself, he says there's no doubt where he could go.
Yeah.
Well, that got explained to him. He took off from that point on.
Okay.
He was a
He was a
graduate. I think he wasn't valedictorian. Was the second. Louise Ogburn was.
Yes, she was
top
the valedictorian.
and he was second, I believe,
told me,
in his
that's correct.
graduating class. That happened that quick, Then he goes to Emory and goes Phi Beta Kappa.
Phi Beta Kappa.
And then he also was in the medical honorary fraternity. But I can kind of understand it a little bit, but I didn't excel. I've always liked to challenge, and I think he did too.
Right.
And he got challenged.
Right.
And so he dug in.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I knew he'd gotten Phi Beta Kappa. He got that, but I did not know that the first part of his education
Well,
he didn't
I'll
do
tell you
that
another
well.
fact about your daddy, and I'm proud of him. While he was at Emory, he realized that he was above average. He was working like a dog for it. He wasn't given to it. And he decided one quarter to see what his maximum was.
Okay.
And he loaded himself up. Made 1 C. That's the only C he ever made.
In medical school or college?
Yeah, at Emory.
At Emory. Yeah. Well, my growing up days with him as my dad, I thought he was brilliant. I thought my dad was very smart.
Well, he was.
Yes.
And you know why?
What?
I don't care where he was. If there was something that had printed on it, he didn't care what it was. He picked it up and read it.
Jim does the same thing.
Yeah.
He was anything and everything interested him.
Yeah. Yep.
And it didn't have to be something really that he ever used.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you another question. Where were you born?
I was born at the house there on the Buckler Road.
At the house, because Dad was born in the Newsom house.
He was.
Said. Yeah.
But you see, he was 2 years older than
Right,
me.
right. So you were born at home.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
born in that, at home. All of us were born at home
Okay.
back then.
Yeah.
Who delivered you? You know?
Dr. Brian, I guess, and
Yeah.
Dr. Mangum.
Yeah.
Do
I
you
don't know for sure.
do you remember sleeping with Dad out on the screened-in porch and how cold it was in the
I
winter?
do. I sure do.
Yeah, had to go. You'd get by the heater or the fire or whatever, and then go out and run, jump into bed and get covered up.
Yes, sir.
He used to talk about that with some kind of cold.
Oh man! Not only that, but just draw up, and then just slowly, as your body got warm to bed, let it stretch out.
Yeah.
But when you first jumped in there, you had to get up as small as you could.
Yeah.
Obviously, you got a love for Reynolds.
Absolutely.
And tell me what it is that keeps drawing you back there. What is it about
Well,
Reynolds
it was
that
my
you
child. Yeah, I was raised there. It was childhood I didn't know what the big world looked like, and it's not all that attractive, as you found out yourself
Yeah.
with your
Right.
the business you got into. It was just convenient, comfortable. I thought we had good churches.
And there was
Yeah.
a crowd went to them too,
Yeah.
to both churches. It was really a unique place because of the people. I mean, you're a good example. You're a Georgia Tech graduate with 2 degrees, successful architect in Atlanta, and you go on with the people that came out of Reynolds, from doctors to businessmen to Mr. Ficklin and Walker. I mean,
It's
you
amazing.
go on and on about the people that came out of that town. What
Country
is it?
town.
What is it about Reynolds that made that happen that's different than so many other towns? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, now I'm gonna tell you, but I give a lot of credit to the school system, which was headed up by Eugene Joyner.
Right, that's what a lot of
That
people
was
say.
no nonsense education for that level of education.
Yeah, I read an article that at one time during World War II, there were, how many did we say, 60-something people serving and 50-something commissioned people in World War II that he taught.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I may be wrong with the number, I'll look it up, but
I think it was 60-something
it was
total.
60-something total, and he taught, he had some function, he named every one of them, and he was proud that he taught. And what they were saying is these people that were all over the world and during the war would write a short, scrappy letter to their parents. And when they wrote a letter to Mr. Joyner, they'd have it indented right. They'd make sure all the words were spelled right, and it was not a mess. It was a different letter to him.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Your siblings, the success just with them. Your mother was Georgia Mother of the Year in 1968 or 9 or whatever it was. You got 4 brothers, and every one of them, you got architects, you got doctors, you got a pharmacist, you got successful business people, and then you can take that family, and there's so many more families you find. It's just incredible what came out of that town. You got the man that started did the first ablation, the heart ablation. You got, the medical center cardiac wing was named after his brother Hugh.
You got one in your family,
Yeah.
George.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He went.
He was vice president of General Electric.
I know it. It just, you go on and on. It just blows your mind that the people that you find that just did phenomenal things out of that little town. It's just unusual, and I think most people think that too. I've heard criticism about Mr. Joyner because of his corporate punishment. He would beat the crap out of people, right?
We are probably what we are or what we were because of
His
those
discipline.
bad things that people look at today. There was no question about it. You didn't want to be sent to his office.
Right.
You just didn't want it. You didn't want to be sent to stand in the hall because Mr. Joyner might walk by.
Oh, Bill, I told Bruce this while we've been talking about all of this, that when I got accepted to medical school at Emory, Dad knew one of the administrative people at Emory, and so he and I were up there, and he wanted me to just meet this gentleman, and so he did. And the gentleman said, "Yep, we know if we get from Reynolds, Georgia, somebody that was educated by Mr. Joyner, we got a good student." He told that to Dad and I.
Well, I think I heard it from Edwards that Emory actually recruited students for Emory.
Yeah.
He recruited Reynolds.
Mm-hmm.
He got in touch with Reynolds. Do you have some students that you can send us?
Mm-hmm.
Because they wanted good students, and they knew they would get Mr. Joyner's recommendation would be all they needed.
Did you hear the story about Mr. Joyner? His daughter, Georgia Tech, did not accept women.
Yeah.
And Mr. Joyner got his daughter to apply in a man's name. She got accepted as a...
She wrote some papers, and as a result of those papers taking top record, all they had to, the only thing they had was a name to say, well, you made it.
Right.
And it happened to be a woman.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's true.
Now, I
don't know if she went there or not. She may have.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure either about
Yeah.
that. You know, Eugenia, I don't know whether she did or not.
Yeah. The other interesting thing, that person was Miss Pendergrass and her son, John Pendergrass.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a well-known singer in New York City. I guess he sang with the opera in New York City.
Yes.
He was on what? Didn't he sing with the opera?
He did. I don't know whether he did it in New York, but he was an opera singer. Yes.
Yeah, and he moved to Colorado, and he obviously did very well because he came to visit his mother often. I mean, just that piece of all that. It's just every time you turn. Then you got Malcolm X's mom and daddy came from Reynolds.
Jeanette, she laughingly talked about us 5 boys. Said, "You get those 5 boys together," she said, "you're going to hear the same stories over and over." said they liked our stories, and they're going to tell them.
I guarantee the Whatley brothers, all of them, loved to laugh.
Yeah, we did.
Ain't no doubt about it.
We were a loving family.
Yeah.
Now, the other side of that was, I tell people, that I came from a family of 5 boys, and they said, "Well, how in the world did you do that?" I said, "Well, let me tell you something. We didn't have to leave home to get in a fight."
You do it right there, didn't
We
you?
did it right there.
Funny.
We settled it. And
Bill, I'm gonna tell you another thing about my mom. She could play. My mom could play the piano
Yeah.
or the organ, either one. She loved to get the Whatley boys together, let her play the piano, and have them, all of y'all singing. However many could make
Well,
it, she would love to do that.
I tell people about the same thing. Those were some of the most enjoyable things. Mama played the piano very well, and we would gather, including Papa. We would gather around her on the piano, and she'd play as long as we wanted to sing.
Yeah.
Loved Reynolds. We love the people in Reynolds. We love what we were taught and what we got out of living in Reynolds. We wanted our children to have the same thing.
Yeah.
So consequently, every chance we got, we took them to Reynolds. And we were fortunate in that we had both parents, Ann's parents and mine there, and we could take them down there and leave them for a week at a time.
Go spend.
And they got to know people in Reynolds. They got to know what Reynolds was.
They knew everybody there.
Yeah. And I wouldn't take anything for it.
Right.
And I think I mentioned it. Judy had one son. She asked me, she said, "Dad, how would it sound if I gave him Reynolds as his middle name. I said, go to it, baby. She named him Reynolds.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.